Hey, welcome back. Politics as usual. Where two former Democratic and progressive political operatives try to make sense of a messed up world. I'm your host, or co-host rather, Big Fred Curtis, coming at you with my co-host, Kat Allen, aka Comrade Thirst Trap. Before we go any further, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to both me and Kat's Substack. You can find those links in the show notes below the video, wherever you might be watching this at. Tell your friends that you got some homies over here kicking some incredibly dope you dig. Alright. On this week's episode of Politics as Usual, we're discussing the death of the Voting Rights Act, albeit a little bit briefly. The survivability of cancel culture. The beloved DNC, one of the most trusted organizations known to man, released the 2024 autopsy report. What?
I'm sorry. The way that you just deadpan now is frying me. Go ahead.
We'll start with a little recap of the most miserable Memorial Day weekend known to humankind. First of all, I blame the Democrats, specifically the DNC, for how terrible the weather was Memorial Day weekend. But that's just me. Kat, did you do anything fun? How was it for you?
It was good. My daughter's birthday is always over Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
And so we had a good time celebrating her. We did get a lot of rain. I would like to think that all of the rain is a direct result of Solange and Megan Thee Stallion being together the last several days. I saw that Megan posted a picture of her and Solange at the beach in the water. Some people may know this, some people may not. Solange is a spiritual girly, and I've heard more than one rumor, and maybe she's even confirmed it herself. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that part. People have talked a lot about how she seems very closely aligned with Yamaya, which is one of the Orishas. I'll do a really poor job describing this simply. She is essentially a goddess of the ocean. And so I think that what we're seeing with all the water and the storms is all them folks on the other side in the other world saying, Clay, when I find you, Clay, one of these days, the rest of the world is going to learn, probably the hard way, unfortunately, but they're going to learn to stop playing with Megan P. She is protected.
Amen.
But yeah, I took my daughter out to dinner. We went shopping, all that good stuff. It was a good weekend.
I love it. I kind of like the rain. I had one of those magical, majestic weekends that us introverted creatives kind of only dream about. So I spent the whole week at school. I sat in class from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m., which is just really hard to do at this age because I just haven't had to do that in a while. And so that is incredibly draining, and my hips are tight, and my back hurts, and all this other stuff. And then, this is 20-year-old stuff. I can't sit here for 6 hours. What? Anyway, and then I love a lot of people I go to school with. So you want to hang out, you want to talk to people, you want to cherish the time. By the time you get done having a couple small beers and having dinner, it's 11 p.m. and you got to do it all over again. So anyway, I came home, drove in the rain, may or may not have consumed a considerable amount of cannabis via, all you church people can go sit down. I live in a state where it's legal, and your beloved Apostle Paul said that you should obey the laws of the land. So that's a different conversation. I'm happy to have that with you. Should you want to
Bro.
And I was in my old movie bag this weekend. I watched The Apartment. You ever seen that?
Yeah.
Oh, that might be one of the best movies of all time. Oh, it was fire. It was like that.
When are you going to start your...
And now we're just head into a very busy summer and last part of the year as we head towards the midterms. Speaking of midterms, so first of all, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I had no idea where you were going with the whole rain, Meg Thee Stallion, Solange thing. There were a significant amount of avenues that could have been parsed down there. And the way you just lined that up and kicked it right down the middle perfectly was incredible.
Thank you.
I don't think we talked about this. So if you're okay with a little bit of detour, and then we'll make up for it in the voting rights time, which I've written an article about, and you can check that out at relentlessfred.substack.com and some other videos. We'll have the conversation, but if you want a deeper dive, it's on there. I did not understand when the whole, Clay cheated on Megan Thee Stallion and all that other stuff discourse came out. I didn't understand people equating that with abuse.
Did people equate it with abuse?
Oh, yeah, that's a whole thing. You didn't see that?
I didn't see that part of the discourse. Were they talking about emotional abuse, mental abuse?
I'd like to think it's like emotional or mental. And like yeah, but there are people who say like cheating is abuse, which, you know, to each their own. I am open to an explanation of my idea of being abused being predominantly physical or psychological or sexual. And that might be a mixture of both patriarchy and misogyny, and also my own sort of lived experience with trauma. I'm fine with that. But I just, like, I put you this way. I've seen, or I saw rather, because it's moved on from the sort of cultural zeitgeist, like comments, clips, articles of people comparing, like, Clay to Justin Fairfax, for example, the former lieutenant governor of Virginia, who killed his wife, or soon to estranged, soon to be ex-wife, and then killed himself. Yeah, oh yeah, that was a thing. I'm so glad you don't have to suffer through these corners of the internet, because I saw there were people making those like direct lines. And is Clay a saint? No, but there's
Yeah.
not a world in which I would have ever uttered those in the same vein. But I think your wheels are spinning here a little bit.
I think like obviously without having like direct access to those lines of discourse, it's difficult to like comment on it directly. But I think that cheating is a betrayal and it is painful. I'm speaking as somebody who has been on the receiving end of it. I don't know what it's like to cheat on other people because I don't live on that street. But as somebody who's been on the receiving end of it, it is a betrayal of the relationship. It is painful. And there are, depending on the circumstance, there are things that orbit around the cheating itself that can constitute different types of abuse, like financial abuse or emotional abuse when you like gaslight people into think we say an accusation is often a confession. And so it's really common for partners who are cheating to accuse their partner of the very things that they're doing and really portray the partner who is being cheated on as somebody that was the catalyst for that happening, is worthy of that happening to them. And so you could absolutely make a case for some of the things like in the orbit of the infidelity itself to be considered abuse. I don't know that I personally consider infidelity itself to
Yeah,
be abuse.
yeah,
Like I said, I do think it's a deep betrayal. I think it's wrong. I think it's a bitch move, if to be totally honest. If you don't want to be with somebody, then don't be with them. You know what I mean? If anyway, but I think that cheating in and of itself is enough of a transgression that we don't need to try and inflate it by elevating it to the level of abuse in order for it to be given the proper discussion and attention that it deserves. And often, like the relationship dynamics that surround that are the things that need attention and discussion. But that's me. I would never in a million years compare Clay Thompson to Justin Fairfax. I would compare Clay Thompson to, and this is me saying this, so take it for what it's worth. I would compare Clay Thompson to, his personality is like the culinary equivalent of just dropping a chicken breast in water and boiling it until it's rubber and then just slapping that shit on a cutting board and be like, here, damn.
oh man, dang, you about to make my hat break.
And this is me. You know what I mean? He is like the personality equivalent of the cargo short and white New Balance
Oh
dad
man.
who mows the lawn combo with like none of the wholesomeness. Anyway, we're really getting off on a tangent. I could spend an entire podcast episode talking to you about all the reasons why I hate the shit out of Clay Thompson and also the Warriors. But that's neither here nor there.
That's fair. That dynasty has fallen officially. Praise be to God.
Won't he do it?
Won't he do it? Praise be to Allah, in the words of President Donald Trump. All right, we're off the rails a little bit here. A little old news. You've heard this previously. The Voting Rights Act is dead. Speaking of President Donald J. Trump. I'm done saying his name. Lots has happened since then. It's funny. For those of you who don't know, there's this challenge. There's this case in Louisiana who had drawn out, or who had written, or drawn rather, one less predominantly black district, congressional district in there. Predominantly congressional black districts came about in the decades after the Voting Rights Act, so on and so forth. And now what we're seeing as they've slowly peeled those things back in the last 50, 60 years, it started with sort of the addition of more restrictions around early voting and absentee voting. It expanded to, in a lot of states like Georgia, for example, to reduce the number of things that poll workers and volunteers could do to help people in line, whether it's pass out snacks and water, so on and so forth, removing mail in drop boxes, things of that nature. And the final nail in the coffin seems to have been there that required jurisdictions who had a history of discriminating against black voters and voters of color with things like literacy tests, poll taxes, so on and so forth, to get approval from the federal government before implementing certain restrictions to voting. That's all gone. And if you ever needed to have an example of why laws matter, why they're important, and what they accomplish, what we've seen in the weeks since then are a number of states, many, if not all of them, concentrated in the old Confederacy, move with all judicious speed to get rid of predominantly black districts throughout their states. Lots of things lost in here. There's been so much said about this and so much written about it. So I'm like, I don't even really want to rehash a lot of the other stuff that's been there. I think the main thing I want to highlight is one, I think part of it, and this is one of the things I haven't seen talked about much, so I'll save most of our time talking about this here, is that black people by and large have never left the old Confederacy. There obviously was a huge sort of movement of black folks in the Great Migration to the Rust Belt, Upper Midwest, parts of the Northeast, even all the way out to the West Coast, as you all know, in the early part of the 20th century. But by and large, most black people still reside in the old Confederacy. And the number of seats, the number of congressional seats that existed 2 months ago that were from black Democrats that will no longer exist after this coming midterms, I think counts up to about a dozen lawmakers and representatives.
Yeah.
Which is more than the margins of some of the closer votes we've had in the House of Representatives over the past sort of 2, 4, 6, 8 years of whatever we would call this kind of governance. And so there's the political aspect of that, one. But then two, like, I think it's kind of time we started having conversations around, all right, what does this mean for larger political power and larger black political representation? Because what we knew, the reason why this law came about, the reason why these predominant black districts were drawn, is sociology. We know, sociologically, I think I said that, we know that when you have these divisions that are across sort of race, that we know those divisions also typically are drawn across socioeconomic class as well. And when you've got folks who have deep divisions politically, economically, socially, and they live in close proximity to one another, the people with more of the power, which tends to be white folks, more of the money, will go to great lengths to ensure that their political power and their political representation is not diminished at the behest of any sort of representation from the minority group or minority party. And I think there is a level of sort of extremism, and we're seeing this sort of deployed in a variety of different areas, so that wasn't shocking anybody. There's a level of extremism that, believe it or not, I think has even been derailed, has been pushed back by way of just having that level of black representation in Congress. Now, am I saying that a lot of these people were Fred Hampton and Barbara Jordan and Medgar Evers and fighting the good fight that Comrade Mandami is doing in New York City? No. A lot of them are older. A lot of them should have retired a long time ago. A lot of them should have done a whole lot more work to raise up new leaders and pass the torch. However, while I don't think the time spent, I don't think age automatically removes you from criticism, I do have an appreciation for people like James Clyburn and Maxine Waters and a ton of others who I cannot properly name here, who know what it's like to stand on the corner of Watts in 1965, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who know what it's like to march on bridges and have a Klan burn a cross in front of their yard.
Mm-hmm.
I am inclined, and I know a lot of people don't agree with this, and I understand that. I'm fine with people that don't agree with it. I'm inclined to allow people who have done those things, who have encountered those kind of threats, who have fought for rights in the face of that kind of danger, to say, all right, I don't agree with this. I don't F with you on this, but I respect that you get to leave when you want to leave. That being said, I think the challenge is that they are so fundamentally ingrained into the institution that is the Democratic Party, is that what happens is there is a fight to be had as far as the direction of the party, the messaging of the party, the future of the party, all the way back to January 20, 2009. That did not happen, in part because they were so entrenched, in part because they're so much a part of the establishment. And now we're going to lose these dozens of seats with no clear pathway to building back that black political power And I think that hurts all of us who consider ourselves anywhere an inch left of center now and in the future. And I think that's more of
Mhm.
my, I don't want to say unbridled. I'm not that smart. I'm sure someone has articulated this somewhere and I just haven't come across it. But I think that's my
Yeah.
biggest concern.
Yeah. It's almost like they did the math and said, how many seats do we need in each chamber? Or screw it, just the House. How many seats do we need in the House? Oh, good. We can draw that. Yeah, obviously the we can't talk about the VRA without talking about Louisiana versus Calais. But slash and slash also, I would be remiss if I did not mention what happened in the state of Tennessee just 6 days after Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was gutted. So if people want a super quick case study in why having the Voting Rights Act in place was so important, here's what happened. Immediately after the Louisiana v. Calais decision, Marsha Blackburn,
Oh,
senator from the state of Tennessee, got on the internet and said that it was time to redraw the maps in Tennessee and that she was talking to the president about it. And the president said, got on Truth Social or wherever and was like, I just had a great conversation with the governor, Bill Lee, and said, we're going to get it done in Tennessee. Mind you, the Tennessee General Assembly passed legislation that authorized a takeover by the state of the Memphis Shelby County School District. And by takeover, what we mean is they assume all of the power that our duly elected school board has. And by the way, I'm of the opinion that at least 50% of our school board members ain't shit, but we need to let the people decide that.
big facts.
So they said, we're going to come in, your school board is now ours, and we're going to appoint an oversight board, a board of managers, right? Now, this board of managers has since been announced, and there's a couple people on there where I'm like, I feel like you're the diversity hire. I feel like you're the token hire for this, but I genuinely, most of the time, agree with you. So let's see where this goes. But most of them are people who have been very ardently, either financially or vocally pro charter,
Mm.
pro religious charters. And so we already knew where this was going. So just that's context. So then Louisiana v. Calais happens. Marsha and the president and Bill Lee are like this. And then our governor calls a special legislative session, not a week after our General Assembly had adjourned. So they all go back to Nashville, all of them. And by the way, I need people to understand this. Whenever your governor calls a special session, you pay for that. You pay the salary, and this I hear people talking about this online all the time at the federal level and the state level. You pay your taxes, pay the salary of your elected officials at every level of government. And so when your governor says, oh, we need to call a special session, bring everybody back, you're basically paying them time and a half. So if
Mm.
you don't like what they're going into special sessions to do, or if they wasted the regular session on some BS bills, you know what I'm saying? Just it's important for people to keep an eye on this stuff and go, is the fiscal responsibility in the room with us right now?
They don't care about that, though. They don't even pretend to care about that anymore.
Anyway, long story short, story long, they go back to Nashville, and faster than I've ever seen them legislate anything that wasn't a trigger ban, they had redrawn our federal congressional district 9, which had been held for almost 20 years by Steve Cohen. And CD9 is also a predominantly Black district. It is almost the entirety of the city of Memphis and part of Tipton County. Anywho, they have sliced that up into being absorbed by 3 other districts. So CD9 now looks different. CD5 and then CD8 all look different. What they did effectively was they split the Black vote, which had been the majority in CD9, into thirds. So a 30 you go in 9, a 30 you go in 5, a 30 you go in 8.
That sounds familiar.
Exactly. Which now means that in Memphis, I'll put up a map or somebody can pull it up while you're listening to this. I in Memphis am in the exact same congressional district as somebody who lives in a suburb of Nashville, which, do 30 seconds of a geography lesson, is insane. It's insanity. Congressional representatives, it is important for them to be in the community, like to live in the communities that they represent. One county is enough. Two counties, stretching it, depending on the size of the counties. But we're now asking these representatives to represent people across 5, 6, 7 counties. There is a place in Memphis right now. This will make no sense to you because you don't live here, but for some people who have visited a lot or live here, it might. There is a section of Memphis where Poplar Avenue splits off into Walnut Grove and then into Union. You can stand on that corner, which is a V-shaped piece of concrete, not much bigger than what it takes to support you if you're standing hip, like with your feet hip width apart. And when you're standing in that exact little V shape of concrete where those streets all kind of veer off, you are standing in 3 congressional districts at the same time.
Nuts.
And so they have effectively drawn out 9 districts in the state of Tennessee. 8 have been held by Republicans. 1 has been held by a Democrat, Steve Cohen. We now have 9 Republican majority congressional districts. That changes the electoral map. So the man that called Brian Kemp and said, find me 10,000 votes, is now saying, I don't have to make those phone calls no more because we're just going to redraw the maps. And that's that.
Hey man, I'm never gonna get over you buffoons who voted for this man after he tried to steal an election. We're gonna relitigate this over and over again. You know something fun? This will tie this all together because this place has only really been a democracy since 1965. If you want to be honest about it, right?
Yeah.
We're doing this whole 250 celebration, blah blah blah. Most of that time, people who look like me was in chains or trying to make sure the kidnapping club didn't try.
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't think people heard you the first time. I need you to go back and say that again.
Which part? That we ain't been a democracy. We started being a democracy in 1965 at the passage of the Voting Rights Act. Like that's when it really started. And so like I think there's this sense of, oh, is the empire crumbling and America as a country is 250 years old and this is about the time that empire started crumbling. Bro, we wasn't a democracy. Like we built the entire economy of a whole portion of the country and therefore most of the country on enslaved labor that was based off skin color for the first, I don't know how long, right? 100, 150 years. All right. And then we said, all right, y'all can be free. And we tried. We knew. This is the crazy thing about Reconstruction. This is crazy. This is why I always tell people, I know I'm getting off on a tangent, but we're bringing this back. This is why I never entertain people who are like slaves from such a long time ago. It's like they recognized immediately after the Civil War that it would be impossible to make people who had been brought here against their will and enslaved whole without some long-term assistance of the government, that they built a whole program that required federal troops to be here in order to help make the playing field level. And you want to know what happened within a short period amount of time? Oh, formerly enslaved folks started doing all right? And then the system, then politics got in the way, and Buddy, I think it was Rutherford B. Hayes, wanted to be president more than he wanted to see black people be equal. And so the troops got up out the South, and that's how we ended up with the Ku Klux Klan and black codes and Jim Crow and all that other stuff. Anyway, we've been a democracy for a short amount of time that Ruby Bridges has been alive, all right? Like, we've been a democracy for a shorter amount of time than Merle Evers has been a widow. Incredibly short amount of time. And for those of y'all that don't know, by the way, Memphis to Nashville, give or take, it's about 3-hour drive. All right.
Yeah. If you're not doing the speed limit and you don't stop.
There's no way in which people can be expected to represent people who they are that far away from. And this is always a problem for me, because it is antithetical to what people who claim to care about the founding fathers wanted to put in place. Right? I don't know if you were ever designed to try and represent that many people across that many different landscapes, across that far away. You might be, we didn't have automobiles and things like that back then. Yeah, no crap, Sherlock. That's not the point. What I'm trying to say is that it's meant to have local representation, right? And the fact that we don't have that, the fact that you got a guy who said, hey, find me 10,000 votes. Buddy said, no, I can't find you 10,000 votes. This is votes matter. And then he says, all right, so him and his cronies spent 4 years trying to figure out a way All right, if we can't find the votes, we'll make up legal ways to go out and not need the votes. It's crazy. And I'm going to end it with this. This is why I can't forgive Trump voters and bring it back to the Voting Rights Act. Because for me, the challenge is like one of the things that used to matter in this country, right or wrong, right? I'm not saying this has always been the case. But one of the things, the lone thing in the American myth that has ever been true is the peaceful transition of power. Before 2020, it was literally the only thing that we said we believed in, that we said was sacred, that we said was enshrined, that was actually true. These other myths, not real, right? This is a wholly homogeneous, racist country with great parts, and I love it here, and I love being here, right? But there's no objectionable, refutable research or way that you can counteract the history of racism and sexism and so on and so forth in America. The only thing that we truly had before that buffoon in the White House was this idea that regardless of whether or not we like the results, when you lose an election, you admit that you lost and you respect the will of the people. And I don't know.
Yeah, for most of the rest of the country, but not the South. Not the South.
Yeah.
Name one time that the South was like peaceful transition of power. That feels okay.
The White House, at least. They don't want to admit they lost the war.
Bro, that's what I'm saying. And then the nation was like, we're going to rebuild. No, wait, that doesn't sound right. We're going to and the South said,
over my dead body.
About all that. See, we got this guy over here. His name's Jim. Jim says you think it's one way, but it ain't that way.
Oh.
Anyway.
I hate all these people. And this is where we're at. What do we do about it? I don't know. Read my Substack article.
Well, the Democratic Party has a plan, right?
Oh, do they? Really?
They got a plan to fix it, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. The Democratic Party has a plan to fix it. You're hilarious. I wouldn't trust them to fix the hole in my sneaker.
They did a whole report about it.
Oh, yeah, they did do a whole report about it. Let's dive into that. It's a perfect segue. The beloved DNC, one of the most trusted organizations known to man. There's Teddy Roosevelt. There's Mahalia Jackson. There is your grandmother who is never late and always gives you $20 bill on your birthday, who's upped it to 40 because she knows inflation is bad. Even though she watches Fox News, she know you can't afford what you used to be able to afford with $20, so now she gives you $40. So there's all those people. But above all of them, in terms of trusted, integral, responsible, there's a Democratic National Committee.
Right.
And they released their autopsy report from the 2024 general or presidential election, rather, the one that saw Vice President Kamala Harris be defeated by the current guy in the White House. There's a different conversation to be had here that I'm not sure I'm comfortable having online, to be honest. And I'm pretty sure you know where I'm going with that, and maybe we can do one of those later on. That would be one I would put behind a paywall on Substack. I'm not going to lie. I'm not putting that on YouTube. I do think, I will say this and then I will move on judiciously. There's not enough conversation about people who say elections are stolen, who plant the seeds for that years in advance, and then who somehow systematically end up winning every single battleground state within the margin of error. And then the guy who's an Uber billionaire who actually owns some of the proprietary technology of some of these voting booths coming out and putting it on a social media platform saying that the president would have lost if not for him. I guess we're just not going to talk about that, which is fine.
What I say at the top of this show when we were talking about cheating, an accusation is often a confession.
Which is fine. We're all just cool with that. Okay. Anyway, I'll let y'all run with that. Maybe we'll do a bonus episode and put it behind a paywall on Substack for the big homies. Subscribe. But anyway, they dropped some things. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I got a few points for those of you who have better things to do with your life than read the autopsy report. I respect that. I wish I did. A few things, and it's not a complete document. There are a lot of things missing in here.
Weird.
Most notably, the words Gaza and Israel do not appear anywhere in the text. I'm reading these notes directly from an excerpt from yahoo.com, which sort of summarizes.
Israel appears no times.
It says the words Gaza and Israel do not appear anywhere in the text. Democrats suffered from internal disagreements over the conflict, which sapped enthusiasm for Harris among voters who are upset by the Biden administration's support for Israel. The report found that the Biden White House did not position or prepare the vice president in a way that would allow her to lead a successful campaign. And it wasn't until Biden announced his departure from the race in July that the campaign's polling team scrambled to get fresh public opinion on three key areas. That would be the vice president's biography and record, her vision and plan, and attacks and responses. Not going to read all of this. Two more points. One, the idea that Trump's negatives were baked in is a major failure of analysis and reality. The report basically said Democrats made the just, I would say, felonious, need to be locked up for this nonsense. The felonious view that people knew Trump's failures and weaknesses, as if we have a responsible, engaged, educated electorate. Anyway, we'll talk about that more later. And also, the autopsy highlighted Democrats' underperformance with men, which we know that, but also that's been trending in that direction for more than a quarter century. So I'm not really buying that. All right, what are we doing? It doesn't even this matter.
Does it matter? Yeah, that's above my pay grade. That is the answer to that question is above my pay grade. I think it does and doesn't matter. And the reason that it does is actually a lot shorter and less satisfying than the reasons it doesn't matter. The reason it does matter is because we exist in a duopoly. And so until we've talked about this in like early episodes, it takes bare minimum one generation, one full generational cycle for any type of real political movement that prioritizes dual power and working people to get a foothold in this country. Right? So people can whine and cry and bitch and moan about the two-party system all they want, but the time to do something about time is always right. But so like it matters because these are we got Tweedledee and Tweedledum. That's our two-party system. Thing one and thing two. And so there's just this constant for both of these parties to duke it out with one another. And I'm not here to tell you that's not insane and sucks. But what I am saying is if you... I'm so terrified that I'm about to get into vote blue no matter who territory. No. Oh, hell no. Hell no. In fact, if you ever hear me say vote blue no matter who, that is your sign that I have been kidnapped. That's my code word for send help.
We pulling up.
Because I don't actually believe that. And there are certain levels of government where the two-party system is not necessarily the only thing, like state and local elections, depending on where you live. You know what I mean? But at the national level, we've got a couple options. We can wait a couple for the next couple generations to establish a viable third party, which is fine. So we're going to have to wait a couple generations for some of this awful shit that's been legislated in the last several years to whatever. Anyway, we can do that. And we should. Let me be clear. We should. But it doesn't matter because the fact I did read the report, I didn't need to, but I did. The fact that they said we're going to do an autopsy report, but calling it an autopsy report is crazy behavior.
Why is this accepted? Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, why don't we call it a retro? Why don't we call it a postmortem? So much better, but it's better than an autopsy.
You dead.
Anyway, yeah, like saying we want to understand what happened and what we need to do as a party. All right, cool, hear you. And then we're not going to release the findings. It's going to be a distraction. And then we are going to release the findings, but don't worry about it. It's also going to be incomplete. And we're essentially not going to do anything about it once it's done. It's just, had it been me, I'm not Ken Martin for a lot of reasons. Had it been me, I would have said, yeah, of course, we're going to understand why we lost this election at every level. And we're going to correct accordingly because clearly something that we're saying or not doing is not resonating with people. And our whole point for being here is to help people, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to figure that out. Are we going to publish those? Why would you ask me that question? What is wrong with you? Why would Why don't you go ask the Republicans where all of their postmortems are, their autopsy, what? Nobody ever holds them to that standard. Nobody asks them the same questions. You know why? Because they know they're not stupid enough to do that shit in the first place. If you think that all of the Republicans like each other, you are living in a fantasy world. A lot of those people cannot stand each other,
They hate each other.
would not piss on the other person if they were on fire, but that's all behind closed doors. When they get out in public, it's a united front. Do you understand how much restraint it probably took for somebody like Mitch McConnell to welcome Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene into the Republican Party? Do you think Lindsey Graham likes them? No. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, this is like the tangent episode, but it doesn't matter because the report doesn't tell us anything that we weren't already saying. Not even us as in politicos. I'm talking about regular ass people. They clocked it during the election. They were like, this isn't gonna work like this. So it doesn't tell us anything we didn't already know. They shouldn't be broadcasting it anyway. They clearly haven't learned their lesson because but it also at the same time, it does matter because what are the options?
Yeah.
If I were Ken Martin, I would be on the phone with David Hogg right now saying, hey, look, we can go back and forth about what happened, but are you busy right now? Are you booked? What's it going to take for you to come back?
I guess he's running leaders we deserve. So,
Yeah. Hell yeah.
yeah. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We talk about this all the time. We've been talking about it since we met 6-7 years ago. There's nothing new in there. I will summarize this here because we'll have this conversation probably a dozen times before November. The Democrats, when they win, in spite of, not because of, and more importantly, I am even more convinced now that the DNC and Democratic campaigns in general won't be viable sort of organizations or institutions in ways that we need to fully usher in a new sort of political regime until the consulting class is predominantly black and brown. Predominantly black because there's still a significant amount of brown people who do not religiously support Democrats for whatever reason. And I'm not saying religious support is a requirement for that, but actually I am saying that, right? Like I've walked into a lot of rooms with Republican consultants and big wigs and leaders who make decisions at the top of that pyramid, and you'd be surprised. You actually would not be surprised to know they're all mostly white. Which this is going to be a weird thing to say, but they probably should be because that's the base of their party. And so when you've got a base that you need to cater to in order to know how to keep checks coming in and how to keep voters engaged, it probably makes sense that you have people making high level decisions that live the same lives and know the same issues and speak the same language as the people you're trying to engage with. And Democrats are never going to be viable as an institution that actually makes any change until the consulting class is predominantly black. What I took from this autopsy report is that the system is working exactly how it's designed to work. We have been saying for decades, you need year-round continuous organizing. You need year-round continuous conversations. You need year-round continuous engagement with working class voters, with women, with communities of colors, with males, so on and so forth. And they just refuse to do it. And you know why I think they refuse to do it? Is because there is a middle-aged, middle-class consulting class who has a huge financial stake and is continuing to do the things that we have done unsuccessfully, predominantly, with some pockets of success, but very few, over the past quarter century. And the thing I point to the most about this is we point to the Obama model as something worth replicating. People forget Obama built Obama for America, David Plouffe, absent or outside of the DNC because of this nonsense. None of this is new. This is who the DNC is. This is what the Democratic consulting class is. This is how they want it to be. Like Emily and Sarah and Matt, and those are just pseudonyms. If you happen to be a Democratic consultant and those are your names, hey, charge it to my head, not my heart. This is a
I know
fictitious
Democratic. Yeah, you just name specific people that I know that are Democratic consultants. Their names are Emily, Sarah, and Matt. That's okay.
And that is the problem.
Case in point.
Like, that is the problem. That I was literally throwing names out and they match, and that there's no incentive to break up this. There's no incentive to innovate. There's no incentive to change. There's no incentive to welcome other diverse voices into senior staff positions because they make a lot of money spewing this same BS, right? And they live in a country that just kind of blows with the wind. And so sometimes they'll win and sometimes they'll lose. But this is all a game to these people. They go back to their suburbs or their houses that they inherited in DC from their parents in 1999, or the money, the plantation money that's trickled down from their family who used to be in Mississippi and now they're in Minnesota, right? They don't care. They don't care. If we keep it at a buck, they don't care. And that's why the abortion issue was such a huge one, because it was finally something that was so directly impacting middle and upper middle class white women that I'm like, okay, this will finally power us up. But if it don't affect you, you don't care. You don't care about working class people. You don't care about black folks. You don't care about immigration. This is all a game to you. It's something fun. That's why we are where we are. Like until the base of your party is the group of people predominantly driving messaging and conversation and strategy and ad placement and so on and so forth, you're not going to have long-term success. I don't even think that's a hot take. I'd like to think I would still be saying this if like I were a Hispanic man or a white man. And I'm not saying there's not room for other people. That's not what I'm saying. But you will know this, and maybe other people listening to this won't know. As a consultant, I've been in so many consultant rooms. We not in there, and they don't want us in there. And they can talk a good game and say they want to, but they don't, and that's just facts. Anyway, that's where we at. And the midterms will probably be great for Democrats. That's because the guy
They'll take the House. They'll take the House.
They'll take the House, might even take the Senate, and the Democrats will pat themselves on the back, and they'll have these huge consulting parties, and they'll talk about they'll spend the next 2 years talking about all the great things and all the innovative technology they did. Bro, all you did was play some ass talking about how terrible the president is. A historically unpopular president. You took the same direct mail templates that you've had for the last 20 years. You took some ads and some B-roll and some stock images that you used 6 years ago.
Yeah, all you did was wait for actual literal fascism to hit the doorsteps of most people in this country in some form or another, like it was delivered using goddamn Amazon Prime.
That's all.
And then you said, we're back. We're so back, you guys. No. Did you win because you won, or did you win because there is no other option?
We back up. That's how they feel. But you know what? And this is the hard truth. That's that white supremacy. Because you know,
oh, hell yeah.
Because you know at the end of the day, you can just lean back on the fact that you're white.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you were talking about the abortion issue earlier, and I'm just sitting here in my head going, yeah, it wasn't enough to move a lot of women, which feels like it should be crazy. Intuitively, that feels like it should be crazy, right? But it wasn't enough to move a lot of those women because the women they weren't able to move were, let's be clear, the majority were the people I'm about to talk about, but then there were also smaller percentages of women who are genuinely pro-life. And they don't understand, and those women don't necessarily understand that being pro-choice and pro-life, those terms are misnomers in and of themselves, right? But that is a different discussion that I would love to have. But the majority of those people, of those women, white women, for whom overturning Roe was not enough, was because somewhere in the back of their head, either consciously or subconsciously, they knew, even if they come for abortion, I will still be able to get what I need because they don't mean me. They don't mean me. And even if they do mean me, I can still find a way. It does not, we don't need to spill any more ink about this. That's why, because white women did not want to do the work to understand how their white is the thing that they will protect above all else. Not feminism, not women's rights, none of that shit. Their whiteness was the thing that they were willing to protect above all else. And now, what now? I don't know.
Look at where we are.
Anyway.
Look at where we are.
Do we have anything fun on the agenda to talk about today?
Rise of the matriarchy.
Most of the internet is bots. You can't convince me that people on the internet are real. But there was a comment left on one of our episodes talking about how I don't understand why I'm so against patriarchy when what examples of matriarchy do I have? None. Because there's never been a matriarchy in human history. Boom. Roasted. I've got human history.
The whole history of human beings.
Meanwhile, Anyway, let me just say this.
Google is right
When
there.
when I do this, whether it's its own thing or another segment in another episode, please understand that you have wildly irritated somebody who went to Indiana University for cultural anthropology, somebody who has been a lifelong feminist, somebody who teaches other women how to decenter men,
It's in the
which
bones.
doesn't mean eliminating men from your life. It means decentering them. I teach other women how to decenter men, and I'm out here with a whole man. But he is not. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. And we're happy, and we're terribly happy. My goodness. But that being said, please just know that when you comment on our videos, you've got a handful of degrees and a lot of lived experience as somebody with decks stacked against them in multiple ways. So just be real careful and consider finding somewhere safer than right here.
I read history books and watch documentaries for fun.
We're nerds,
like,
huge nerds
like,
with a modicum of empathy. It is not safe for you bitches over here.
because it's not safe for you. Yeah, like we're not gonna do this. Actually, I gotta start diving into these comments more and just pulling the ether out. Because
I made the mistake.
then I can cuss people out and I can have plausible deniability because I can just be like, "Oh, that was Cat. That was me."
I never looked at the comments until like several weeks ago. I broke my own rule. I got to go back to not looking at the comments, but
That's what they say. Sometimes you gotta drop an ether, man.
but then I felt dumb cuz I'm like, this is a post by not a real person. I'm arguing with a bot farm.
It could be Elon's
What am I
27th
doing?
child. You never know.
It's Elon's oldest child.
And with that, who has no love and affection and doesn't actually know their father, but and you can tell him I said it. You can tell him he's not gonna sleep with you, bro. You can tell him I said it. It's okay.
I know that's right.
It's all right. Hey, we're gonna be back. We have to have this cancel culture conversation. I really want to have this because I want your insight and your view on this. But we'll do this next time. And then I gotta talk about Aubrey Graham because I think Aubrey is in a very interesting way of our cultural decline of the last decade and a half. The mediocrity floating around a late 30s rapper who has essentially created a new genre of hip hop, which I'm calling victim rap. Like, I think that's indicative of the man. I think it's indicative of late stage capitalism. Like, I think Buddy is really like a symptom of the disease of cultural appropriation and victimization. I really think he is. And yes, I'm a Drake hater. Yes, I mess with Kendrick. But I think, like, from a subtle perspective, like, I think there's a sociological argument I can make there. And maybe that's something I should write. That might be better written. But anyway, to put a loop on it, right? Like, how does this relate to politics? I think all this is connected politically, right? Like, I think the fact that, I'll put it to you this way. You cannot convince me it's a coincidence that this light-skinned guy from Canada who made his acting debut on a TV show on a channel that my black ass parents couldn't even afford to have emerges on the hip hop scene a year after the biracial guy who becomes president with the black mom. Those two things are correlated and no one can tell me otherwise, right? Like, I don't think if you get John McCain in 2009, anybody in hip hop allows a light-skinned guy from Canada to meteorically rise to the top of rap music. I just don't think that's the case.
Obama's mom was black?
No, she's white. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I was like, hold on. Did I read the wrong biography?
No, you read it. You're one of the few people who actually read it. Everybody pretended they read it.
Yeah, yeah. Aubrey got a white mom too.
Of course. I ain't got no beef. I got a white mom. Shout out Jennifer. I love you. But like, my actual mom's black and Panamanian. But you know what I mean. But anyway, I think all that's kind of connected. And I think as we can connect some more of these dots from a cultural, social, political perspective. I think that allows us to better figure out, all right, who do we want to be? How do we want to go about becoming those people in the next generation? Because that's how long we got to even this thing out. That and packing the course. But anyway, I've talked enough. Politics as usual.